The Colosseum floor shattered beneath boots of iron and ash. The ghostly image of Cratus appeared before Kratos. Instantly, the ghost of Sparta drove the blade of Olympus downward with the force of a tectonic fracture, burying the divine steel deep into Kratos' chest. Blood erupted, hot and crimson, soaking the marble. Kratos stood breathing heavily, his golden eyes narrowed in grim satisfaction, expecting the familiar, agonizing death rattle of another rival. Instead, Kratos looked down at the blade protruding from his sternum, then back up at the god of war. His expression remained entirely neutral, neither pained nor angry. With a dull metallic scrape, Kratos casually reached up, grabbed the blade of the legendary weapon barehanded, and yanked it out of his torso. The gaping wound didn't bleed out. The flesh simply knitted itself back together in a slow, eerie ripple of greying light. Kratos tossed the blade of Olympus aside like a discarded twig. A low, guttural roar tore from Kratos' throat. He launched a flurry of strikes designed to dismantle a god. He summoned the Leviathan axe, sweeping it horizontally to cleave Kratos in two. The blade passed cleanly through, but the phantom flesh mended instantly before the weapon even cleared his side. Frustration spiking into raw fury, Kratos materialized the blades of chaos, swinging the fiery chains with blinding speed. The jagged blades wrapped around Kratos' neck and arms, searing his flesh down to the bone with white-hot, mythological fire. Kratos didn't even blink. He simply stepped forward, pulling the chains taut, letting the blistering heat scorch his skin into ash that immediately regenerated into flawless grey tissue. Kratos drove his bare fists into Kratos' skull with enough kinetic force to level a mountain. The impact shattered the stone beneath them, sending shockwaves across the arena. Kratos' head turned slightly from the blow, but his eyes remained completely vacant, his neck snapping back into alignment with a sickening crunch that felt more like a mild inconvenience than an injury. Kratos froze, his fists hovering in the air. He had fought gods, titans, and monsters of endless fury. He had torn kingdoms apart to fuel his vengeance, breaking every obstacle that dared stand in his path. But as Kratos stared into the completely indifferent eyes of Cratus Unfazed Immortal, unscathed, unbothered, and untouched by the chaos of war, a sudden hollow realization settled over him. There was no damage to inflict, no pain to break him, no mortality to exploit, no fury to answer his own. Kratos slowly lowered his fists, the magical fires of his blades dimming into cold ash. The fight was already over, because against true, immovable eternity, violence had lost all meaning. Kratos reappeared not with a flash of light, but with the quiet assertion of his presence, standing once more on the ruined ground. His overwhelming aura of freedom was slightly muted, focused now on a conceptual rather than destructive intent. Kratos, who had been standing resolute amidst the debris, turned his head. "Why do you return?" Kratos demanded, his hand gripping the Leviathan axe, ready for a fight that he knew could not be won. "If you are free of conflict, be gone." Kratos shimmered, his conceptual form seemingly studying Kratos. "I am free of conflict, yes, but I am not free of the burden of definition. You, Kratos, are defined. Your image is fixed by fates you slew, by actions you took, by a story told across worlds." Kratos stepped closer, the ground beneath him remaining whole, though the laws that held the rest of the ruins together were still tenuous. "I have absolute power," Kratos continued, his conceptual voice carrying a note of genuine, existential frustration. "I am liberated from limits, rules, and causality. Yet my name is Kratos. How do I craft a character, a narrative that avoids the constant, inescapable comparison to your epic saga? I am powerful, yes, but I am new, unknown, and every time I am introduced, I will be measured against the shadow of the ghost of Sparta." Kratos paused, the sheer absurdity of the question bringing a frown to his face. He processed the words. Character, narrative, saga, comparison, shadow. The concepts were alien, relating to a reality beyond his own comprehension of gods and monsters. "You speak in riddles, spirit," Kratos growled, lowering his axe slightly, seeing no threat in the strange, conceptual despair of the being before him. "What shadow? What comparison? There is only the burden you carry and the choices you make to carry it." Kratos sighed, a sound that was less breath and more the gentle dissipation of a minor rule of physics. I am not burdened, Spartan. That is the point. I am free. But I cannot escape the pre-established concept of my name. To the observers, Cratus is merely a lesser, or an imitation, of Kratos. How do I forge an identity that is wholly my own, when the foundational clay, my name, is borrowed from your legend? Kratos planted the Leviathan axe, head down into the shattered earth, resting his hands upon the handle. He did not understand the language of observers and narratives, but he understood the language of identity and purpose. I do not know what a comparison is, Kratos said slowly, his voice laced with the hard-won wisdom of a millennium of suffering. But I know what it is to be defined by what others say you are. They called me a monster. They called me the destroyer. They called me the god of war. He fixed his gaze on Cratus, the older, wiser Kratos speaking now. Kratos' advice. Your power is to be free of rules, but that freedom means nothing if you are a slave to the opinions of others. You believe your name is your limit. That is a rule you have chosen to accept. Do not waste your boundless freedom fighting a shadow or a name. I became the ghost of Sparta because of the ashes of my family. I became the god of war because of my relentless vengeance. My identity was forged in action and blood, not in whispers. If you wish to be known as Kratos, and not my echo, then act as Kratos. Let your deeds define your existence. Do not worry about how others will define your struggle or your purpose. Simply have a purpose and do the work. If your actions are truly unique, if your choices are your own, then the name will follow the meaning. Do not change the name. Change what the name means. Cratus stood silent for a long moment, the absolute freedom within him perhaps struggling with the weight of that simple, brutal advice. The advice was entirely grounded in action, identity, and choice, the very things Kratos had fought so hard to reclaim. To define myself through action, to choose a purpose, Cratus murmured, the concepts hitting his unburdened mind like a physical blow. That would be a self-imposed limitation, a chain of my own making. Kratos nodded sharply. Yes, and that, I have learned, is the only chain worth carrying.